Okay, I want to apologize for that. This is battery issues. My battery went dead on me, so this is part 2, or the final part, just a few slides of the material I wanted to cover for your middle 1/3 of the Chapter 5 lecture material. So we're going to pick back up on the slide we left off on, which should be right here. We were talking about food cost category, percentage, and production. So this is an illustration of those two things. And I was saying that when we look back, the meat category, the proportion of cost here is 48.3%. But when we look back at the proportion of total cost for employee meals, it was 60%. So something's not quite right about that. And hopefully employee meals aren't going to break our budget, but these type things we can kind of track down and see where we think we should be versus where we actually are, to detective out and find those expenses that are not appropriate. Anything else I want to say here? I think that's it. Just as a reference here, you probably already saw this, is the sales amount is here for $190,000 to get the formula components. Okay. All right. Next, we want to move into discussing particular problems in the kitchen, or sometimes called production area. Okay, and there are 5 basic problem areas here. I recall some of the examples of waste we've discussed before. Remember just the old Butterfingers, people dropping things, people tripping, dropping a whole sheet pan full of chicken, etc., things like that. Improper weighing, improper measuring, individuals just not following the instructions they were given. So we're going to talk some more about stuff that happens in the production area. We're going to ask what happens when you overcook an item. What are the physical impact? What are the physical limitations, the impact of that? What happens to the food? What does that mean for the customer? And then how about over-serving? Good for the customer, bad for us. That could be impacting our expenses in ways that we did not intend. Okay. So wasting increases our costs or increases our expenses. And one thing in particular we want to mention is poor training, okay? And we do need to make sure our employees understand proper weighing and proper measuring, how to read measuring cups, how to use measuring spoons, how to use a scale, those type things, how to use decimals. Hopefully we'll stay away from fractions. Decimals are a little easier. So, but we want to make sure that happens so that we can avoid problems in those areas as far as food waste goes. Next thing we want to look at is thinking about how does increased cooking time or temperature impact our items. And so what we have here is an example of overcooking that leads to shrinking or shrinkage, sometimes called shrinkage, our product shrinking. So we're going to start here with 800 ounces. We want 50 pounds to get us 800 ounces of roast beef. So if it's properly prepared, what we get is 108 ounce portions. Okay, easy math. And what that gives us is a portion cost of $4 per 8 ounces. Now, if we accidentally or intentionally overcook an item, then we can see what happens to the ending weight here in the second column from the left. It starts to decrease over time, about 25 or 20 or so ounces per 15 minutes. Now we don't just reduce the portion size. The customer still deserves an 8-ounce portion size. That's what we determined was what they wanted and what would be appropriate for them to make them all smiles. So as our ending weight decreases, the number of portions we have has to decrease as well. And you can see here in the table how those decrease. Now the last portion of this is what happens to portion cost. So the number of portions is decreasing as we have fewer and fewer number of portions here in the second from right column. The cost of the portion climbs up and up and up and up. So the idea here is that we started out with these 800 ounces, and ideally, if everyone had followed the instructions, we would have had 100 portions to divide that cost of $400 over. But as they decrease and decrease, then we have less number of portions to divide this $400 over. So that drives up the portion cost over the situation. So one way to manage expenses. And we said that what could we use to help us with enforcing proper cooking time and temperature? The standardized recipe. So you can think of the standardized recipe as a tool to control loss. It helps us enforce those cooking times. So we said this before, but we'll say it again. Standardized recipe should list the portion size and explain in detailed procedures the equipment to use. The approximate amount of cooking time, the final cooking temperature, all those things should be listed. It helps us maintain consistency for our customers. Now, so one thing we should mention is that, so what happens if a mistake happens, employees don't follow the standardized recipe, some unexpected circumstances come up, and we impact the final product in a bad way, and the quality's decreased, it's not where we think it should be, then what should we do? What are we required to do? If we're intended to help our customers and meet their expectations, then we need to keep that in mind. Another type of mistake that can happen in the production area in the kitchen is overproduction. We can cook more items than what we need to. Sometimes, and many times as a supervisor, I would find employees cooking 1.5, 2 times the amount of items that they were going to sell that day so that they could get ahead for tomorrow. Those carryovers can be a problem, okay? We want employees to produce the number of portions we need on that particular day so that we can have the freshest possible items for our customers. So we're going to invest in some tools to help them make sure they get the proper portion size first off. And those are going to be things like scales to weigh out, scoops, ladles, dishes, spoons, dishers, I should say, dishers, spoons. All that should be listed in a standardized recipe. Another tool we talked about is a communication tool, and just recently we talked about in the chapter, we talked about the production schedule. The production schedule is going to list out the number of items to prepare for that day. And that is our way to relay or communicate to the employees the numbers we should prepare. And that brings us again back to leftovers or carryovers. And we have to ask, should we decrease the price the customer pays if we have made a mistake in some way and impacted the quality in a negative way? Is it fair to customers if we charge them the same price, but yet we know that this isn't the best we could have done? Should we decrease the price to the customer? And I guess that depends on your basic ethics if you should do that or not. So now we're back to our original, to bring it home, and something very important is to come back to our pie issue and recall that we had a situation where we were over preparing coconut cream pie for Scotto's Dinner Club. And if the kitchen has produced too much knowingly, and the quality is decreasing over time, then perhaps, I offer this as a suggestion, is that perhaps we should really own that. And if the quality is decreasing, then we should decrease the price. There's no sense that the same value is assigned to the older product. So at that, we'll leave it here. This is where we'll pick up next week, whether you're in section 1 on Monday or section 2 on Tuesday. If you have any questions, feel free to send me a message. And I also look forward to any constructive feedback you have on the video. Thank you so much.